A lot of the systems that were meant to produce secret order actually got corrupted and called fallen, is what I call it, which means they ended up doing the very opposite of the thing that the organization or the order was created for. If we were with no blocks, no obstructions, we'd be levitating by now. We'd be far more progressed. To get us in this level of consciousness, to keep us this polarized for so long, to keep us on these timelines, you would have to not just hide things intentionally from us, you would have to insert in its place constant disinformation and constant toxins and constant narratives and division. What I'm saying, which is why I'm so excited, is the optimal timelines. And there's more than one, but I'm simplifying it. Those optimal timelines that you and I are talking about are already established.
Sarah Elkhaldy, welcome on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
I'm really excited about my upcoming projects next year. I'm going to be expanding a lot of my content, expanding a lot of my production team to produce that content, and that just brings me my greatest joy.
And for those that don't know and didn't see the behind the scenes, we literally blew out the power with our intention, prayer, meditation that we did. What was going on from your end?
That was just, we called in too many guys. That was just so much power. As soon as you called in Isis, honestly, my whole spine was on fire. I was like, whoa.
And we did a short meditation. I had never felt that many chills before pressing record. And I don't know what that did to the energetic field, but we're here. Take 3 is the charm. So Sarah, to begin, I know you've said that we're in the midst of a Hermetic revival and that we are witnessing before our eyes this return of ancient knowledge. And I would love to begin with you just uncovering what are those key pillars of knowledge that are coming up to the surface that our ancients knew in the past.
Oh, so much. But the key pillars would be that we are divinity and that it's not separate from ourselves, and that we were in a separate experience for our own development, for our own growth, for our own lessons, because that was a part of the divine blueprint. It was to descend deeply into the dream state of duality of the third density, and that now we're on a spiritual ascent. And so that ancient Hermetic revival holds so many tools for our own empowerment, but mainly our spiritual sovereignty. As a matter of fact, I would directly link our spiritual sovereignty with not only alchemy, but with how we're supposed to be navigating and discerning and decoding our reality. It would be through the lens of developing spiritual sovereignty.
What is it like to see the divine in everything, in ourselves as well?
It's a trip. It's a massive trip, because unity consciousness is something that even has layers to it, right? It's not just one blank canvas where we're walking into it and we can't see anything besides our own reflection. Instead, it's every facet and every perspective. And because of that, it's so amazing to be able to experience ourselves through not just the lens of other gods, the lens of God consciousness, but also be able to learn all the different facets, all the multidimensional facets of our own being and what we are. We'll start to realize we're actually a group consciousness, and that we're going by one name, and that we're going by a singular solidified being or perception or ego, but that we're actually a group consciousness. And that's what I'm talking about when I say multidimensional. All of us are multidimensional. So going into unity consciousness is really experiencing that multidimensionality.
I know you refer to a lot Carl Jung's teachings on individuation. And there, I'm curious to go into why we decided then, if we are a group consciousness, to individuate into these fractals of consciousness that are experiencing ourselves as this singular spot of consciousness when we are the whole.
Yeah. So when we go down a scale, which is fractaling, we go down a scale and we go down a scale and we go down a scale. At best, what we can do is become an ambassador of something far larger than us. And that's why you always see really high level spiritual intelligence, no matter what. It's not like how I'm referring to a disconnected form of spirituality, but the spiritual intelligence itself looks a little odd. And that's because it's a group consciousness at that point, integrating into a singular identity at its best. I did a video on this about like how we can help our spirit guides. And it was because my guides were telling me that that would be a very beneficial perception to switch the tables for us to really get the full perception of how important our unique individuated self is and how it's important to maintain that paradox. So to answer your question, the reason why they wanted to fractal down and experience that is because that gives more information. That's like the ultimate adrenaline rush in the universe. It's being able to really have an individual, separate experience while going through that spiral evolutionary upward ascent back into our evolutionary spiritual sovereignty. So it's to go into our spiritual sovereignty again. And this is a really important point that I think will really help people who are confused about spiritual sovereignty, individuation, and how that actually relates to being a part of a group consciousness or a group collective. Because we usually think that those things are opposing one another. But really, we have a lower potential, and that's called like a hive mind. I'm sure you've heard of like a hive mind before.
Yeah.
The hive mind isn't what I'm referring to as that larger and higher group collective. The hive mind is what you could look at as a very immature, or it's a human stage of development that I would call adolescent. So it's a younger phase of development. And when we individuate, using Carl Jung's terminology, we individuate out of that immature state of being, which means we become discerning, we evolve, and we go into sovereignty. So that's why I'm talking about sovereignty being individuation. So we mature out of that hive mind mentality. We're able to think for ourselves. We're able to have our own experience of things and to have that strong individuation. In esotericism, that would mainly different threads of esotericism would call it different things, but what would be agreed upon is that's when the I is developed. And when the I is developed, now we can opt into the group collective, what we are at a group consciousness level in the higher way. But that now it's from the mature awareness of the fully experienced I. So the paradox of reaching individuation is not that you're singular and an isolated being. It's that now you can be a responsibly conscious and higher aware being, knowing your higher connection now.
And that allows us to operate in a completely different way when we know that we're connected with that higher mind. So where do you see humanity headed? Because when I heard you tune into the energies of this year of 2024, what was brought up in that video that you made was that we are here to live out that karma of Atlantis and even Lemuria. So in those times, what are we reclaiming from that era? What are we reclaiming from Atlantis, Lemuria, and bringing it into this modern era in a whole different way where we can begin to see ourselves as those spiritually divine, individuated beings that maybe those civilizations saw themselves as, but now we're just doing it in a different way?
Great question. We're learning how to use technology responsibly. And we're learning how to use our emotional body in a way where it's not suppressed, but that can actually elevate our evolutionary potential. We have figured out through trial and error that a consciousness cannot go any further than or technology cannot go any further than the level of consciousness that is welding that technology. So that brings me to the third thing we're learning that is from Lemuria and Atlantis, and that's abuse of power. We're learning how to not abuse power, what we would look like if we're given power. We're all being tested when it comes to giving us certain ratios of power and seeing how we would act with that, because abuse of power is what created chaos and destruction. In both civilizations, it was just completely different forms, but it was a core theme of abuse of power. And so the technological aspect is very important, because from the Lemurian age, we're going to fit those two together with Atlantis by bridging it with the heart center. The heart center being linked deeply into the integration with technology and the advancement of the higher mind, the intellect. Those two not only coming into balance, but really being able to work together synergistically as they're supposed to and in harmony, so that then we can have technology actually benefit our evolution and help us with our next stage of spiritual initiation, which is cities.
Now, if we're not in abusive power, through which lens of perception do you see power and how we're redefining it right now in this day and age?
That's a great question, because we have so many different things we project onto power. And the cleanest, most potent source of information when it comes to defining power, I would say, would be David Hawkins' work. If you're familiar with his book, Power versus Force, those clearly show the difference between power and force. And so power is coming from something that is innate within all of us. It's not something that some people want and some people don't want. As a matter of fact, if you look at every shadow we see in the world, it's because of something that is not being respected of its power, or something that felt that that was the only way it could get its power. So both extremes of not having a correct and healthy relationship with power, whether it's one where it's fully denying it or one that's fully trying to dominate with its power, both lead to all of the different destructive qualities we see when we're talking about a collective paradigm, like the human curriculum, the curriculum we're currently in. So we're learning right now through this curriculum what correct power would look like. And that would be honoring that everyone and every single thing has power. That's stepping into unity consciousness. It's really understanding that power is innate within everything, and to honor the fact that everything has power. So with that, now we're connected, or we're tapped into the unified field of consciousness is where power comes from. So we could go even further into what power is now and look at it as the force that's being welded through source, energy. So power would be, like, for instance, we all have a connection to source, but how much we honor that connection will depend on how much power we can run through that. So because of that, it's not that some people are more powerful than others because others lack it. It's also about understanding how power works so we could literally allow ourselves to run more of that power through it. And so that's what I'm referring to right now as source consciousness energy. So power would be source energy that we could run through ourselves, but also at a more subjective and intimate level, it would be honoring the fact that every other thing in existence is also source. It's understanding those two elements of power.
I was telling you a little bit before that I was just coming back from this trip from in Egypt, and we were going through the temples, and for me, you would go into that space and feel empowered. You would feel the power of the energy in that space. And the song we just played, Golden Age by Fia, which was recommended by my dear sister Alunia, it says in one of the lines, the wisdom of the temples, the arts that got lost, stolen and abused by worshippers of the dark, they are reclaimed by the priestesses of the golden age. So I wanted to go further into that, as in what is being reclaimed right now in terms of our power, how it was used, how it has been misused as well in society, and what we're really here to see and see ourselves as temples.
Yeah. So I did a video recently on the witch wound. And that goes into a lot of different elements that I just did not feel called to really bring into that I could do separately. But power from this perspective of what was lost, what was abused by dark forces, we could look at that as like the Shakti energy. The Shakti energy, the goddess energy, is the one that rises. It's the one that enlightens, it awakens. So when you can diminish that, when you can traumatize it out of itself, when you can extinguish that, then now you can control people more because they're easier to control, and they don't have that enlightening force. So the feminine energy in that sense is the one that enlightens. So targeting that is very important if you want to control a population.
What happens when you mix milk and honey together?
Well, literally, that would be it goes into the optichasm. And so it would create enlightenment. Milk and honey would be from the pineal gland pouring into the pituitary.
Yeah. So going even further into that process of alchemy to really be in the fullest power and realization that a human can achieve, how would you explain that process to someone when we are creating that, going into the Ark of the Covenant, which is in our brain, and mixing those two elements of milk and honey and creating alchemy within that?
How would I what?
How would you explain that process for someone?
Oh, so the process has changed. So in past ages, there were specific initiations. Now, whether we're talking about shamanism or whether we're talking about a specific even Hermetic practice or Hermetic exercise, the initiations have changed with each age because the energies have changed drastically with each age. Even the energies from 10 years ago are nowhere near the energies now. So what you'll find is even in shamanism, indigenous places have massively changed their own rituals. So the ones that we try to learn and maybe apply that were hundreds of years old, not even the shamans are using those anymore. That they've been told by their spirit guides that the energies have changed. So we're all in our own ritual. We're literally all in our own initiation. And so what I would say to that is that it's still always important to be able to tap in and honor the self as the temple. But with that, the same exact practices don't actually have the same level of potency carried from each age. For instance, I did a very popular video on the sacred secretion. And the only reason I allowed myself to do that video, because I got asked about it all the time, And I already knew that the energies changed, but I didn't want these people to feel bad that they were doing something that didn't work, because what I got was it can still work if you don't tell them the most specific part. So what I was given was, if you tell them the formula, but you do not tell them the part within the sacred secretion, what to do, that allows them to activate their own gnosis. And now they have a template so they can still proceed in the sacred secretion, which is what you're talking about, which is the land of the milk and honey. It's being able to actively rise the seed, because by the time it gets to the enteric nervous system or the manger, it's just a seed. It's a seed of spiritual essence. And so once that rises, what I was told was, allow them to fill in the steps in that part of the procedure of when it rises. And then it will still be an effective practice, but it's one that imprints their own self-initiation within it. So I'm still modifying old practices to help people still keep within something that they would like to do, but will still activate them further, even though that specific initiation served a certain age that we're not in anymore.
Hmm. And you mentioned it perfectly, how spiritual initiation has shifted now in this modern day, because when you look at ancient cultures, you go back to Khem, you go back to ancient Egypt, and the initiation was really for only the select few, those groups of priestesses and priests, to really understand where they were coming from their consciousness. What do you feel into or remember from the rituals or practices that they would in ancient Khem participate in, that maybe now we can modify to create a new formula that you're talking about?
Yeah, so Khem specifically was where the origins that we have the most in this age period, in this epoch, the potency of alchemy. And then from there, it kind of got diluted and it got mixed with other brands of Hellenistic thought. But before that, the specific period you're talking about, it was all about the Merkabah, which is the light spirit body. Mer meaning light, Ka meaning spirit, body meaning Ba. So the Merkabah is what ancient Khem, when we're talking about the highest level of alchemy, because I could go on about alchemy and Khem, but the most esoteric of the Egyptian priestly caste is where alchemy from this age was carried out from. And the most important thing that needs to be preserved from that would be the light body, the activation of the light body.
Where are we right now with that activation of our light body?
I'm so impressed, because even just a few years ago, I am humbled. I am impressed. We're doing really good. Something happened within the past year and a half. We've shifted. What was going to look like 15 years got shifted into like a 5-year time frame. It's no longer like 15 years out. The evolutionary jump we've made in a year and a half.
And going into, deeper into that process, you mentioned the Merkabah. Is that still something that would be relevant for us to tap into in the process of activating that light body? And maybe first, I think it would be helpful to lay out what the light body really is and where we're headed from these physical bodies.
Yeah. And then if people would like to go even deeper into my explanation, they could look into my video Ascension Cycles, where I talk about that. But the light body would be also what we would consider like the merging of our higher self. So our humanity and our divinity merged. In alchemy, that would be like activating the philosopher's stone. So there's these different words for it. And I don't want to dilute the importance of the Egyptian priestly caste version of alchemy. That is still alive and well. That's still always that's never going to go out of style. That's always going to be important. What I was mainly talking about was the different procedures through the Hellenistic area or the Hellenistic region and age. We started veering off in a lot of different directions. And then with the Byzantine filter, which Christianized even more everything, it put everything through a Christian filter. We lost a lot of the potency of the real core meanings of alchemy. The real core meanings of alchemy, like why you went to Egypt, that's never going out of style. And that needs to be preserved and brought forth and taught. So I was mainly talking about all of the different exercises we do in every age to activate the light body. Those will shift and change, but never the fact of the light body being so important and how to activate it. And when you're going to those sacred sites, you're getting those codes. It's even more important. So with that, how we can really tune in and activate it now is through mind-heart coherence. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yeah.
Mind-heart coherence, because I could go on different threads. You could pull any information out of me that you'd like for where to go in a specific direction for esoterica. But when we're talking about the Merkabah and we're talking about spiritual initiation to that degree of entering the light body and what is the light body, that would be our multidimensional portal, because the light body can travel out of this reality. So the light body is our portal, and it's how we connect with other star systems, and it's how other star systems can connect or we can interact with them. So it's very real. And how that's done specifically through any initiation would first be to go into enlightenment. That does not actually mean, because there's different stages of enlightenment, that you'll activate the light body. But that would be the first, you could look at it, prerequisite. So a lot of times if we're just looking at what the light body is and we want to activate it, that's not going to work. What we need to do is awaken into enlightenment. And then from there, we can start fine tuning and getting those codes and those activations to start activating our light body. That's why a lot of my work is really focused on discernment. It's because that's a key and core piece that's going to help dissolve people's barriers within their own mental body and their emotional body, which will enlighten them. And I get that feedback all the time. I get that feedback all the time. They go, I don't know what you were saying at first. I didn't know if you were pulling my leg. And now I get everything. And now I'm in samadhi.
You said that, before I've heard you, when you were talking about discernment, you said it's something that can't be taught, but it has to be experienced. So getting more of that experiential lens from you, like what is the greatest experiential learning that you've had of discernment?
So many. It never stops. I think the most would be, I know that this might not register at first, but I've always had a very open mentality to the brink of naivety. So my main lessons when we're talking specifically about discernment have actually been because I thought other people were like me. And so I had to learn that people do want to pull one over on you, or they do want to trick you, or they do want to do something that I wouldn't do. So I've had to learn the other.
And what you're saying there as well is, I believe that we project our qualities, the light and the dark, into the external world. So what is it like to go back again as a mirror, going within, and maybe understanding where those projections are really coming from?
It's really about intimacy. It's really about not having an agenda about how I want myself to be, but going in there and just openly being able to commune with what is. So when I find this very, not naive, but sometimes on the brink of naivety, when I find this like really open, and we could even call it innocent part, it feels very vulnerable. And the reason it feels very vulnerable is because it's not wearing anything. It's not in some sort of impressive state. And so it's vulnerable, because when you look at that, all you're seeing is innocence. And we're trained in the world, our ego, we're always conditioned to need to twist something from innocent into something that is, cooler or whatever it may be. And so for me, it's been really just being able to look at both my negative projections and my positive projections, but go into the roots of them and really just be able to fully be present with what parts of myself I was projecting onto others, and why. So the greatest level of discernment I've learned, and that I continue to learn, is through the other, but that's not meant to be said to sort of like promote a sort of jadedness. It's meant to really then return back to self and go, well, that's what you're here to transmute. It's not to go, okay, well, don't be that way. Instead, it's, oh, I was supposed to see what is not like my innocent nature, or what, so that then I could absorb that shock and not continue the cycle.
When you were talking also about the projections, anyone that is on that journey or path of consciousness is able to see their own projections, but also able to see the projections that others are putting out into the world at times. And I think the hardest delivery or conversation to tell someone is, hey, I think you're projecting. And I think we've all probably heard that in a context where we're like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that at all. So how do you manage the delivery of when you can see someone is projecting a realm of their internal consciousness onto maybe you, the world, or any certain situation? How do you navigate that?
I used to not navigate it well at all, and it debilitated me. And what I gained from that was a lot of internal power. I realized you're here to trigger people. I'm a Blu-ray. I did a video on Blu-rays. So I won't go over all of it here, but it's literally by design that I meant to trigger others. And so when I aligned with that, and I realized that I signed up to not be seen at an even more denser degree than most people, because we all have issues with not being seen.
As a Leo?
not being seen by the other, not being seen by the other correctly. So when I really aligned with the fact that I'm here to trigger people, I'm here not for the small talk, I'm here not for the small stuff, I'm here for the larger purpose. And it's going to trigger, and it's going to trigger the in-betweens, and it's just going to trigger. I really aligned with the soul contract this life, and that the energy exchange was not going to be an even energy exchange. And once I really aligned with that, I had so much peace, and then I had a lot of joy and excitement, not to trigger others, but to do what I was doing with liberation. So I still learn from the projections of others. I don't think projections are completely useless. I think we can always learn something about something. I don't take them on, but I can understand even if someone's projecting, and I know they're projecting, and just because I know they're projecting doesn't even mean that I'll wash it away. I'll still go, oh, they're definitely projecting, and I could tell where it comes from. Claircognizance is a gift and a curse. You know everything about where the projection came from. And then what's really fun is that when you align with your higher self and your soul contract, what you'll notice is that the purpose is to take the high road. That doesn't mean high road meaning acting better. That doesn't mean high road going, oh, I'm going to reject the part of me that's angry. No, I have a very healthy relationship with my anger. And if anything, it's why I have a highly successful, a very popular energy healing practice. I'm one of the top energy healers in the world, I can comfortably and easily say. And that's because I have such a healthy relationship with myself, and particularly my anger. So it's not about, when I say take the high road, it's not about spiritual bypassing. I'm talking about literally coming from the higher self and seeing it from the higher self's perspective about what the soul contract was behind the projections. Once you can align with a projection and being able to also, from the heart center, call out what it is to help that person wake up from the fact they were projecting. They might not wake up, but you're providing them with that opportunity. And then if that, spirit will give each person multiple opportunities, but you're providing them with the opportunity of waking up to what they're doing when you speak out. But on top of that, also not having it be a ping pong game, truly understanding that even within projections, there's always things that we don't have to use as self-abuse, but also something that we could probably use as a seeds for self-awareness, because that's really what helps a person grow.
Is it a possibility for us to see the world through objective reality? Or are we always tainted a little bit with our own subjectivity and our own perceptions and beliefs onto the world?
This is such a beautiful, powerful question. Yeah, there's no way to fully objectively perceive reality. It will be filtered through the uniqueness of the subjective lens. All you can do to the best of your ability is purify that lens, clarify that lens. I even teach this when it comes to channeling. Sometimes people ask me when they want to learn how to channel, how they get out of the way. And I let them know, I don't get out of my way when I channel. In my videos, you probably can't tell that I'm channeling unless you see me take a break. I go, and that's really because I'm trying to translate a better word, because I'm like, how do I Sarah that word? So that's why also I'm really animated. It's not because I walk around that animated. It's because that's how I channel. I channel, and it's just easier if I look animated instead of going like that. So I tell people I don't get out of my own way. It has to go through Sarah. Yeah. So because of that, there's a beauty in being able to embrace and unify and merge the objective with the subjective in a way where they're working together, and then that will help bring the best clarity.
I saw you define, or when you were talking about alchemy, you said that it's the art of purification through reducing. So I think the question there is, what exactly are we reducing in order to create alchemy in whatever we pursue, or in our lives in general?
Our blocks, our complexes, everything that is not truly us, everything that we had invented as a distortion because of some sort of either coping mechanism or some sort of buffer. I come from Gurdjieff's fourth way. And the first thing we all learn in fourth way work is what our buffers are, and if that buffer can actually be removed. Sometimes they need to stay there. Not forever, but sometimes that buffer is not the first place to start when it comes to consolidating or to clearing. So if we look at it through the lens of buffers are things that we invent, whether they're belief systems, whether they're complexes, whether they're fragments of our own self. They're things that keep us from a larger, more accurate, more aligned reality. So to answer your question from a fourth way perspective, what would be being purified and reduced is our buffers. And I love the saying, whether it was actually a quote or not, from Michelangelo when he was talking about carving the David out of one giant ball of marble. And he said, I just took away everything that wasn't David. That's alchemy.
Do you see that as a collective, as we end the year, as we're heading into a whole new year, which 2025 has been prophesized to bring a lot of different chaos, change, shifts for the world, what would be one of the biggest buffers that we're confronted with that we can get over that hurdle to be connected with that wider reality that you're talking about?
Scarcity consciousness. And scarcity consciousness isn't just at a monetary level, but it's how it's how our consciousness perceives. And we're moving out of scarcity consciousness more. And how that would look isn't just with finances. It would look quite chaotic to our current paradigm, because our whole paradigm's set up to be pitted against one another and in some form of scarcity consciousness. So while we're removing that block of scarcity consciousness, with that comes all of the ways that our paradigm is set up for that. So that's why I'm saying it's chaotic. It's not chaotic because, oh no, it's a bunch of doom. Instead, it's chaotic because we're making very strong, heart-centered, unified connections going, wait, if this is what's going on over here, and then we're all doing this, and then so we're all navigating unity consciousness. The awakened collective is navigating the implications of what it truly means to live, not just, at a theoretical or even a mental level, but actually live a quality of life that is a reflection of that consciousness. And that would be what I'm calling quite chaotic. And 2025 is a very interesting year because even though I'm not super promoting the perennial system of the yogic cycles, I will say that there's some strong sources that have tracked the truth of the Sapsari calendar and have linked the Kali Yuga ending to 2025.
We'll see what unfolds. We'll see what's going on there.
I had to throw that out there.
Plant a little seed in there. And Sarah, there's very few quotes that have radically changed the way I see the world. One that I wanted to bring up in particular with you is coming specifically from the Kybalion with the 3 initiates that we touched on a little bit before recording. But it's that opening quote of the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. And I wanted to go deeper with that quote with you because it seems that, the lips of wisdom have opened completely for you. And I think also as I delve deeper and more in coherence with this work, the lips of wisdom open for me as well. So what is that process of, tuning in that radio dial of our ears to higher understanding, to be able to really grasp all of this wisdom that is flooding our way if we allow it?
The greatest gift/curse perhaps I've had is subtlety. If a butterfly lands on a person and they're sensitive, you can learn everything, way more than whatever information was in the butterfly landing on you. It's not about what was said. I could speak for 3 more years making YouTube video after YouTube video, and it might land and it might not, and it might after some time, which is what I'm noticing it does. But the point being is that if you're sensitive, you could even learn what I teach, and not even from me, from a butterfly landing on your shoulder. And if you don't have the ears, it doesn't matter how much I talk. It doesn't matter how much the lips of wisdom open. it'll be like, oh, there was a butterfly, and they move it away. So my gift / curse has always been my sensitivity, my subtlety. It's being able to take, it's quite poetic. And I would say ascension is a poetic process. It's becoming a poet because you're looking at anything now and you're getting so much information, and it's just from the communion with it. Does that make sense?
It 100% makes sense, because I relate that a lot to what I just lived in Egypt. And the most powerful experiences that I had there was when I emptied myself from negative thoughts, expectations, even food, before going into the temples or the pyramids, because I was able to tune in to those subtle frequencies that are available there. And it takes me a little bit, I guess, more effort to get into that state, because I do have a lot of, masculine energy, but also being in the subtlety allows me to be more in the feminine. And that's a gift I feel that we can all tap into regardless of gender. So when have you had the biggest breakthrough in your understanding about the world by being sensitive and tuning into the subtle energies of your spaces?
Constantly. Constantly. And what I've noticed, and your audience might really be able to use this, is the more that I teach, the more comes. I'm never worried about, oh no, it's going to run out, or the connection, or more comes. I used to have to write scripts. Now I was start getting information that wasn't even a part of my awareness when I was writing the scripts. So I was like, oh, okay. So really, it's something that is a process that is a gift that keeps on giving. It's at a certain point, it's no longer even, it's so integrated. At a certain point, it just becomes so integrated that now it's a part of it. It is you. And so the ability to not just tap into that subtlety, I want to get people really used to the fact that that can just be their mode of operation.
Is that the new iteration of human that is emerging on the planet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are so lit. You could just look at the baby's eyes, and I'm like, whoa, just start crying. Yeah, they're already coming in with far more things that they're tapped into, energy centers that have already been activated. They don't need to activate.
Any new energy centers are developing?
Not new in the sense of we don't have them, new in the sense of they'll come in with them online. They'll come in with them activated, ones that we haven't used or that we would, need to go into techniques to use. And I don't want to be vague. Earlier, when I said that once we go into enlightenment, then from there, we need to be able to activate the light body, but I didn't really give like how to do that in this age in the current energies. They're already really strong within this age. Anytime you see a practice on mind, heart, coherence, you could look at that like the spiritual initiation of this age.
Would love to go deeper into that, because I've learned about that through Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And, I'm just going in a few weeks or a couple months to the first 10-day retreat that he's ever done in Cancun. Wow. So I'm super excited about that. But I know what it feels like to enter into that coherence. Why is that the new spiritual initiation?
That's the most established spiritual initiation in this age, because that's where we're at. That is for our energies for this age. That is the new, you could look at it like the new initiation. It's syncing up the mind and the heart, coherence. And it was called different things in different ages, and there's different practices. But like I said, things got put in certain prisms of perceiving it. And so it's not that having a tradition inserted over something is wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But with so much that was lost in that process, then it was useful, but it wasn't something that carried on within the next stage would be as useful. Because it's kind of like if you and I were talking right now in medieval language, if we had medieval slang. It's like, well, we have our own slang in this age, and there's certain energies and potencies in this age that relate to it. And so with that, mind heart coherence is our initiation for the light body, for those higher DNA activations that we're seeking, for all those things. It's not only the prerequisite, I would say it's actually the initiation into that.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears for a moment, what is the universe's natural law?
Great question. That all beings are sovereign. So natural law is the way that this universe was constructed. And what that means is it's never going to go out of style. We wouldn't want it to go out of style. It is to do no harm unto others because they are also God consciousness. They are just as sovereign. But also that the masculine component of this has to go hand in hand with it. So you could look at the feminine as do no harm. The feminine energy is always the advocate. It's always the inclusive energy. Do no harm would be advocating and inclusive. Like I see you, you are me. The masculine energy would be able to assert oneself to preserve that law and protect that law. So it would be the one that we are called into asserting ourselves, asserting our sovereignty, being able to call out and speak truth, especially in the voice of so much lies. Having the backbone. It would be natural law is don't do harm, but if harm's done to you, it's law now to have a backbone.
Where does revenge play into that?
Yeah, so revenge is so interesting because I don't actually see a lot of the things that word is used for as being like worthy of revenge. When I think of revenge, I think of like Count of Monte Cristo. Like, okay, that guy needed revenge. Like, so for me, I'm like, that's revenge. A lot of the things, like even if I was, done dirty this life, as long as I was not physically harmed, so I would say revenge comes into the picture when there is boundary violations of a physical nature. If there's boundary violations of a physical nature, then a person, I would really believe that they need to go into an emotional process and depths of really owning that emotion, that large temperament we're calling revenge. Don't put it away from yourself. Lean into it. Connect with it, really process revenge. But when we're talking not about physical boundary violations of any kind, if we're talking about a lot of the things that we see passed around in this age as, memes about revenge, like the greatest revenge is to no revenge, move on with your life, things like that. If it's that level of revenge, then I would call that, like soul contracts, or I would just call that like learning to move on, self-awareness, so that you don't have to experience the thing that you became aware of that you don't want to experience. So where does revenge come into this picture? I think revenge is absolutely valid. I'm a heart-centered being, and when you get really, really open with the heart center, you can even take revenge in and understand that. Because now you're just looking at what needs to be healed. You're not putting any sort of stigma against what it takes to get there. You can be a true healer, aka energy surgeon. And when you're that honest and open, you're now abundance will come, even because spirit can use you to help truly heal people. I don't mean like I'm doing the healing. I mean like help people embrace themselves to that degree that they can own their revenge. So the light, the paradox is the light can fully embody the dark, and if it can't, it's not truly the light.
Yeah. One of the biggest emotions that I think is most left out and suppressed in modern society is rage. And when I think of something like revenge, I can't separate revenge from feeling rage, because that's the emotion that I most connect that to. So, for someone that maybe hasn't felt rage in a long time, or even the way that society is set up to make us feel like we can't express our rage, what would you say to that nature?
I say there needs to be people brave enough to be able to show true leadership in full transparency. And I don't mean that they need to be in rage, but I mean they need to be transparent, because we learn through leaders. And when I mean leaders, I'm not even talking about a select or elite few. The greatest prophecy of all came from Andy Warhol. Any other prophecy still isn't as strong and true and accurate as Andy Warhol saying that in the future, everyone's going to have their 15 minutes of fame. Well, look at us now.
Maybe 20, maybe 20. You never know. You never know.
We could all go viral overnight for whatever. We'll wake up and go, what? That? I just posted that. And so everyone is a leader because everyone's can influence everyone now. It's not, just these small but large elite outlets. So with that, we can all shift the emotional body of the collective by all mirroring to the collective transparency. It's okay. You're not crazy for having emotional reactions in response to being violated. What kind of crazy, spiritual distortions is that placed over? So really what's coming through is true heart-centered consciousness, but we needed to start somewhere. So the energies were always doing the best they could to get us to this level of integration.
Keyword there, integration. And I've heard you say that integration starts in the physical body. I know you were a personal trainer before you got into all of this work. So what is the role of our bodies while we are seeking to integrate all this esoteric and hermetic wisdom?
My body has been my greatest teacher this life, hands down. I've learned everything that has made me who I am today through taking care of my body, or through a resistance that I held to my body, that I held to even form. Everything. My body has been my number one teacher. So what it's teaching is love, unconditional, pure love. That's what I would say. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it's only taught me love at a deeper level each year and how to take care of it. And now that's even my hobby. My hobby is like how to take care of my body, health.
And I'm curious to know how has expanding your container of wisdom and knowledge changed your molecular structure or your body, on a deeper level, if it has at all?
It's made me more comfortable in my body, literally, like learning about the fascia. I always had an adhesion of fascia that would bundle up on my left side in my shoulder blade. And now that I've learned more about my body and I'm getting specific work done with an osteopath and with a myofascial release therapist, and with, I just recently got a tongue tie release because I found out I had a severe tongue tie. If you asked me 1 year ago if I knew what a tongue tie was, I would say no. What is that?
That's a metaphor there.
Is that like a chew toy? Like a tongue tie? And now I got one released and I'm retraining myself how to speak. It's coming along smoothly, but now the adhesion's gone. My neck can stand up for the first time without the pulling fascial musculoskeletal pain. That's all because I've dug deep into learning the musculoskeleton system. I learned the esoteric systems before like the basics, but we all have our own path.
What are those esoteric systems that you first explored?
Oh, so many. My favorite, my truest, my core is fourth way work, as I mentioned earlier. But specifically, what you're talking about, like esoteric system, when it comes to the body, is for sure the spine. The
Mm.
spine. I even tell some of my clients, I say, if you just look at spinal health, that will actually help you understand and receive the upgrades stronger that you can receive for free. Because I provide activations and upgrades, but I always tell people the spine is a motherboard. The whole body actually has specific body points on it that tap into specific areas within it and then are also connected to different thought forms. But since I don't work on people anymore on the physical body, I just work on them remotely. What I tell them is the spine is the motherboard. It is doing so much. It is responsible. The fascia system and the spine are the two largest systems responsible for our upgrades and activations. So treat your spine well, because if something doesn't make sense, or you feel like you're a little too confused, a little too blocked, a too little overwhelmed, and it's been going on too long in your journey, or you're in a dark night of the soul that seems to be never ending, whatever seems like you objectively feel has now become too large of a storyline inside your spiritual awakening and it's serving as a block, I would say look at how to better improve the spine. Look at how to support the spine, because that will help our spirit and our innate intelligence self-organize in so much more at a higher capacity that won't take so much effort and force on our part.
What's the metaphor there of the spine? What is that really teaching us?
It's teaching us so much. When we look at it just from the root chakra, because many of us know that the root center is connected with the base and the muladhara, which is where we get mula, 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 money.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Oh, that's where it comes from? The
Yeah,
moolah? Oh.
that's the muladhara. So it's there, but that's just the starting point. It's at every level. So I know some kinesiologists that in the 80s were hired by NASA to like figure out the different body configurations and what their connections are. And so this is one of the things that I've integrated into my own practice. And so the spine has that literally each part of it. And then within each part of it, even more micro themes that are connected to everything. So just like how money's connected to the lowest part, that's just the beginning. They're all connected. And the higher up you go, we start getting into more spiritual themes until you reach the 33rd degree. And that would be known as care. It would be known as the metaphysical concept of care. But each one down is each column, each disc, all of them. They all represent a very strong and powerful archetypal energy, because I'd still consider money an archetypal energy.
Speaking on the archetypes, I've seen you talk about the magician in the tarot cards, and I've also seen you using a coffee mug of the High Priestess card. And I'm curious because we've touched upon ancient Egypt, we've talked about the rituals, the initiations. What is the current archetype of the High Priestess or priest look like out in the world right now? Like how would a High Priestess show up in the world today?
Okay. Yeah, that's the funny thing because that goes into a larger topic, which is like, what would pure feminine wisdom the the high priestess is known for hidden. Now she's known for a lot of other things too. I could go on about her. But one of the things that is strongest that I feel called to bring forward when we're talking about the high priestess right now is hidden. She's usually a symbol of the higher self, and she's representative of subconscious or occulted, aka hidden knowledge. So, with that, what you'll see the high priestess look like is people who are sharing hidden or occulted information of a higher self wisdom. That could look on the outside, if we're talking about the shell or the book cover, like many different ways. But it would be those core features of what was hidden and the knowledge of natural law, because those are what the pillars represent, as well as those paths in the tree of life. But all of that is, she's the representative of your intuition too. So if you see like expert tarot readers, what they'll do when she's coming up is they'll know that sometimes they'll even just straight up say, oh, this message is from your higher self, because that's how synonymous the high priestess is with information from the above, information that is not from this world.
Mm. Making a lot of connections right now, especially with Egypt. This is quite a big question, but why do you feel that knowledge was hidden throughout history? And, in what instances would a piece of knowledge may have been best to not disseminate to the masses, and why certain sects in, different societies, secret societies, why they would keep that within their sphere and not give it to the mass population?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, because I've even, through my own journey in esoterica, have gone through the magnifying glass of hidden or rightfully concealed. And there's both going on at once. And this is the trickiest part. If a person's really into occult and societies in general, they'll really want to listen to this part. And that's a lot of the systems that were meant to produce secret order actually got corrupted and called fallen, is what I call it, which means they ended up doing the very opposite of the thing that the organization or the order was created for. So, and that's not talking about every order. I have gained much knowledge from Hermetic initiations through Hermetic orders. So I'm not talking about every single order, but I'm talking about why I would come to that conclusion that a lot of the stuff was intentionally hidden versus just concealed away until a time when humanity can better integrate it. Humanity, if we were with no blocks, I don't mean no contrast, that's different. If we were with no blocks, no obstructions, we'd be levitating by now. We'd be far more progressed. To get us in this level of consciousness, to keep us this polarized for so long, to keep us on these timelines, you would have to not just hide things intentionally from us, you would have to insert in its place constant disinformation and constant toxins and constant narratives and division.
Yeah, I'm letting that one sit because I can feel a lot of energy moving through that response. One thing when I first started awakening, I was in college and so many things were happening, but one of the first things I heard was, we're entering the age of Aquarius, and Aquarius is air and air is information. So information is coming out to the public, and I feel like that's one of the main purposes of this channel, and what we're both doing is getting information out there. But looking through like a time portal, let's say, of course, there's still a lot of things that are hidden and being suppressed to disempower us, and we're being fed disinformation. Let's say in about 5 years, 5 or 10 years, what do you feel is a piece or pieces of information that will be released that will change the trajectory of this ascension timeline that humanity is going toward?
To be completely honest, we will be the ones that change the ascension timeline, and that will change how information gets revealed to us. So it's the opposite. It's not that we're going to have a slow drip of knowledge that will then help us accelerate. We are doing it. And the more that we accelerate, the timelines have to come forward. So then the storyline will be whatever the storyline will be to benefit that optimal timeline we're on. So we write that. And it's empowering to know that, but that's not why I'm even saying it. I would be fine to know that thing. I wanted things for maybe, I'd say like a decade ago. I really was in alignment with having specific conditions met in the external. And then once those are met, then that would make sense. That would make all these different things would fall into place like a domino effect perfectly. And then the more information I was getting, the more my own gnosis was coming through. And then I realized, oh, the timelines respond to us. We are the ones that now have something come forward, but it's not coming forward based off of the fact that we were dependent on it. We become spiritually sovereign, and then all of a sudden, the external timelines start matching up with that. That's kind of also what I was mentioning earlier when I said that we went a year and a half ago. I was like, I thought whatever shifts we were going to be making in 5 years would be 15 years out. And now to know that, that's because of how much we're subconsciously at choice points for very empowering timelines.
Yeah, and that's a potential there. It's like we're not waiting for the government to release, all the documents and whatever that, they've been hiding. It's one potential there is, and I think you're a way shower in that, being a claircognizant where you just, you know things, information comes to you. It's activating our own gnosis where we don't need to seek the validation of someone else telling us this is the truth, this is the information we've been hiding from you. It's like we would already know it. So what does activation of gnosis look on a larger scale for humanity? Is that a timeline or a potential that we're on?
Yeah, we're already on it. I'm excited. We're already on it. Now, me and After School came out with a
Mark.
really,
yeah.
Shout
out Mark. I love you, brother.
Shout out to Mark. Guys, make sure to watch After School on YouTube. His channel's just amazing. It helps people with the illustrations. Me and Mark did a collab on timelines earlier this year. And I wanted to talk about entropy, and he suggested timelines. And then I went, okay. And then I realized as we were doing it that it was about entropy anyways. So I was like, oh, okay. So that timeline video, that was divine, because that wasn't because I wanted to do the topic and I felt like we needed to do it at that time. The energies were right for that message. And I'm just very grateful that the message came through me for that, even though it's coming through others as well. But that's really important to be able to understand this. And I know that there's other way seers as well that are also seeing things play out this way. And it's through a splitting of timelines. So everything that I'm saying about how excited I am and impressed, and with that, that's about a specific timeline. I'm not at all suggesting that that is the only timeline and that's the only experience that we will collectively be experiencing. But it is far it's far easier when a timeline has been established to now just get resonance with it versus not really seeing that as a probability. When it's just a possibility, that you're moving towards and that you're hoping will gain momentum, that's less real. What I'm saying, which is why I'm so excited, is the optimal timelines. And there's more than one, but I'm simplifying it. Those optimal timelines that you and I are talking about are already established.
In that video as well, when you were talking about the timeline split, you said that the fifth density and the third density, for some time, they're going to coexist with each other until there's an eventual split. So, you know, for some people, they might say like, oh, I'm in the 5D completely. But I feel like we're at that stage of the timeline where we're still in both right now. And it's really, you know, you've brought up in other videos, like the cognitive dissonance, to be in complete fear, you know, powerless, helpless. And then on the other side, you're getting experiences of love, connectivity, joy, you know, these higher states of consciousness. That's really tough to bring together. Like for me, coming back from Egypt, which I 100% can say I was in the fifth density partying for 25 days up here. And then I come back to Madrid and I'm like, whoa, like, where am I? So I think that's something that we're all dealing with right now. And I'd love to speak into it a little bit further.
Yeah. I don't know how this sounds when I confess this, or why I even use the term confess, but when people have to literally tell me something and then I understand it and I go into that reality. But I'm literally in a timeline, and I'm not making this up, where a lot of the things that the people in the timelines next to me are experiencing aren't even in my timeline, which is why I recently did a Mandela effect video, because I had to at some point go, okay, I don't think you're lying, but this is such a difference. And so I'm experiencing a Mandela effect to a degree where I'm like, I don't even know how people would believe me if I said this. They'd probably think that I'm like lying or something, but I'm really not on a timeline where a lot of the things that are of a third density nature, of a really chaotic nature, are even happening. And so and I'm not saying that I'm purely in a higher density, because my work isn't meant for that. I'm meant to tune in and to help people. But how that would look like in the world is through a lot of Mandela effects, you know, with parallel timelines, even with people that, you know, you're in resonance with, but it's just like not full, complete, absolute totality of the timeline that you guys are like both in, but you guys are like on parallel timelines. And so with that, that would just look like being really focused on creative projects. I would say that's how I do it. Being focused on creative projects, while also like I blew out my circuits long ago when it came to fear. That doesn't mean that I don't experience fear, but the things that I experience fear about are not anything to do with the collective. They're like, how will I be able to be with my loved ones in the next place? like they're things about how much I love. They're not about like, oh my God, I need to stock up on this because that's going down and this and that. They're not fear-based in a collective way. They're fear-based in a very personal way, something that like at a soul level, I'm meant to just learn from and integrate. So that said, I'm not bashing fear at all, but, and this is going to sound very cliche, but how we traverse those is through, for sure, the energy signature of fear, which what can be useful is knowing like, okay, well, what do I do with that? It would be, how present are we? Because the more that I see a person is attached or anxious about things that would lead to fear and tying them to the third densities, you know, strong polarizations that they're going out, there's a deep level of lack of presence and threatened. So to be more useful, because fear can mean at this point anything, and it might not be that helpful, It's looking at the things that threaten us and the things that really we use as distractions from our own presence. Because at this point, also another theme, there's things we don't have control over, and there's things we do have control over. And one thing that we do have control over is to really look at where we're addicted to those narratives that are keeping us out of presence. Because when I look into it, a lot of times I see that there's far more of us that is addicted to it than actually is causing the problem there.
And for you going into that higher timeline where you experience fear less and all of these other things that come with choosing, maybe a more fifth density timeline, was it a conscious choice or like a big intention that you set in your life that then propelled this new timeline forward, or just your way of living? Like what really was that shifted you into that state?
I had a massive nervous system injury in 2018 that really collapsed my health. My health was already really bad, which is why I was talking earlier about how it's been one of my biggest teacher, my single-handedly biggest teacher. But it came to a climax in 2018. And after that nervous system injury, it made me get honest with myself, because I was far more into the light. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we don't all just grow perfectly. We have so many different dimensions in us. It's messy, and that's growth. But I really now look back, and what I could say is that I had a lot of heart activation, but it wasn't integrated at all. It was more like a lot of what I would consider like false light, because it was keeping my humanity out. And so the nervous system injury put me squarely, not with my light because I was already in it. It put me squarely with myself and the resentments I held between what I wanted and the version of myself that I felt I couldn't be, because I needed to be this one type of like pure being. So the nervous system injury was actually a gift. It was a gift from my higher guides. It was a gift from my purpose. It was a gift from my higher self, because I had been asking for so much energy, and not verbally, but when you activate your heart and I remember at one point I said, I just want all beings to ascend. And I said, just use me however you need to as a vessel for the benefit of all to ascend. You better be ready for what that means and how that looks if you say that. And that wasn't even coming from like a bad place. It was literally coming from my original pre-birth intention, which was just to elevate as much as possible, as much as I can elevate. And so I was asking for a lot of energy, more than my life was at the moment designed for. So of course, my life collapsed, starting at the most basic level of all of my physical health. My vision changed, everything. So what shifted for me was not needing to go into the light. I was located there. It was learning about what the light is in all of its facets, which was the light will use the voice to say something harsh if that's what is the medicine. So I don't say that all the time, but love goes, what is the medicine needed here? And being, the best as you can to discern. Because later on, you'll look back and go, you know what? I didn't have this tool, but actually this tool would have been better. So we're always learning, but the light can do it all. And what I wasn't doing and what I did after that was just be the light, even if you look dark doing it.
How did the unintegrated heart activation unfold for you?
Very painful. I had eczema, and it's not from that. I had that brewing. And that had escalated into Hashimoto's. Then that had escalated into a nervous system collapse. So what that looked like was really a lot of physical pain. And I haven't had specific type of pain this life, and I'm very grateful for that because I see a lot of other light workers chose certain contracts for a lot of certain types of abuse that I just haven't experienced this life. But what I have experienced this life has been a lot of physical pain. And learning to love my physical body and learning what that means and learning its roots and learning everything from the spiritual level to the mental, emotional, physical, the astral level. I became a specialist on accident about physical health by learning how to just heal myself.
What has going into pain taught you?
So much. The best thing it's taught me is to be transparent. My body has taught me more than any workshop or exercise could. Because when you're in pain, you're desperate to get out of it. And so when you're desperate to get out of it, what you're doing is being met with the most humbled, even humiliated, weak, fragile parts of yourself. And that's connected me even to being more unconditionally loving.
When we follow this, I guess, universal law of ask and you shall receive, it almost seems that you ask the universe for a little bit more than you could handle at that point. How would you have asked that question differently into the universe to maybe have received a smoother ride down that path? Or would you have even chosen a smoother path? I don't know.
If I could, I would. I would. I'm not one of those people that will tell you, no regrets.
Regrets.
No regrets. I'm from SoCal. No, I'm not one of those. I can look back and I could say, how could this have done? How could we have landed this plane better? But to be completely honest with you, it was the version of myself. If I couldn't have changed that version of myself, then no other way that I could perceive would it have happened. So I see that the injury came at the severity of the purpose that was being called forth. And it was in that sense, it was equal, and it wasn't a punishment, or it was equal to the level of severity.
I've heard you say that we will not be able to locate our actual life's purpose if we're not having a larger capacity for truth. So if our bodies are temples, if we are containers, how would you explain to someone the importance of expanding their container to receive larger amounts of truth so that they could connect with their life's purpose?
Well, the good news is that life's doing that for us. And that would be what I call like the first stage of awakening. I've never done a video yet on the third wave of ascension because I just haven't felt called, but I do have a video on the second wave of ascension and the first wave of ascension. And then I found out later that Dolores Cannon also made waves of ascension, and they were opposite order of mine. Like the way I was given it, first wave of ascension meant the tip of the spear, the ones that are leading the way. But anyways, so the second wave of ascension are the ones that are stepping into really piercing through the darker nature of reality, all of reality. They're the ones that have a large capacity or will need to expand their capacity right now to embody as much truth as possible. But how this is a good thing is that we're told, like even in high school, to kind of already have in mind what we want to do later on in life for a career. In high school, I didn't know any careers. It wasn't until I got to college that I even knew about so many different avenues. So imagine now, take that and apply it to awakening. you might truly have a calling, but you don't even have the awareness of it because you don't even have the truth of this reality to even know that you're excited about that. And I'll give you an example so this doesn't sound vague. Let's say a person they don't know this yet, but they're really into a whole new way of transmuting our water and making super pure water systems and all that stuff that I don't want to do, but I want someone to do. But they don't even know that there's that need because they're not awakened enough to know the issues with what's happening in the world. Then they won't even be able to know that they're truly inspired to go down this rabbit hole or to go down this path and then go down that path. And then that's going to lead them to something that they're very passionate about. But let's roll that back now. And let's say that they don't have a large capacity for truth, but they're living more in ego. And I say that in no demeaning way, but let's just say they're living and operating from the ego state. Then now they're still going to have that pulse. They're still going to have a strong thing, but it has no awareness of what it's trying to be called to.
Do you have a sneak peek as to what would be the third wave?
Well, it won't be fun because the first wave, to me, the fun. I wanted to talk when I first started my career about activating DNA. I had no idea I'd just be talking about discernment, and more discernment. So the third wave would be even before the second wave. So as I said, the second wave would be like activating the heart warrior, the one that is, telling you not to have those poor quality foods. They're still fighting over distilled water. It's cute. They're adorable. They're just, they're very about the external world, the physical world, which is great. We're here for it. But they're all about more so like the external things that are suppressing us or controlling us. So the step before that would be like the semi-awareness and the subconscious call to the journey. So it's in its germ form yet. It hasn't grown. It hasn't nurtured or cultured itself into that choice of going down the spiritual awakening path. And because of that, you know what? Actually, as we're talking, this is a very interesting topic because when I tune into certain groups of people or individuals, sometimes I'll see them look down a well, and that's my third eye activity communicating to me that they're aware of something, but they haven't chosen to fully to allow themselves to become aware of it. Have you ever heard of that, like Navajo saying that once you wake up, you'll never go to sleep again?
I haven't heard that, but I love it.
I love it, but this is that point because they're subconsciously going, if I go down there, there's no going back. And so there's this fluctuation point where you see them look down there, but then a large percentage of the time that call is not answered. So that's why I don't even tune into it. I tune into it at the second wave because those are the people who chose to answer that call.
Yeah. And to add on to that well vision that you saw, like for me, whenever I don't know how many wells I've looked down in my life physically, but when you're looking in there, the metaphor is you're looking into complete pitch black darkness. So it's like the metaphor is we know we're aware that we have darkness within us. But we don't want to go fully into it. We can maybe see it from a distance. Like, yeah, we can see reflections of it here and there, but to really go in the well or in the cave or in the temple to the sanctuary box where there's no light coming in, I think that's the metaphor there as well of allowing our light to shine in the darkness and being in the darkness first.
Yeah, totally. And then if I were to poetically illustrate my perception of that, it would be the asking. because I think awakening's fun. So to look at it like a dark hole wouldn't necessarily be the truth. It could be a roller coaster ride that a person's looking at. It'd be like, well, there'd be lots of ups and downs, and it'd be wild and intense, and you might puke. But so for it to be like a well, it would be like almost tuning into their internal dialogue and being like, this is what it's asking of me, to go into like that thing I'm not sure of, that I don't see, that's uncertain, that, is unknown.
I love that it should, I mean, it should be fun as well, right? I mean, going into the darkness isn't necessarily all like doom and gloom or terrible. Like, if we go in with curiosity instead of judgment of what we're going to find out about ourselves, and when we pull that out and bring it to our awareness, that's like a whole another faction of yourself that now you can bring to the world. And that's why they call the shadow integration process. So we just went down a whole well of wisdom. You are a well of wisdom. I know that we will have to continue this conversation many, many more times, because I can just deep dive with you for hours. But Sarah, we end every show with a segment called the Final Trio, which are just little questions that we ask at the end. But before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with your work, with all the beautiful reflections that you're putting out to the world? Where would you send them?
Yeah, so you could go to my website, thealchemist.community. That's where my article's at. That's where you can sign up for my newsletter. And I have in-person one-day events where I just give a transmission on the spot to the group, or my alchemy retreats that I hold in Sedona and then other places. But yeah, or my social media. But if you go on my Instagram, you might run into some of my imposter accounts. So make sure it's the.alchemist. That's the only one. Or, right now, currently, I'm still on YouTube making beautiful passion projects there every week. So yeah.
All that will be down in the links, and we'll include it in the show notes. And as for the Final Trio, the first two questions are personalized to the guest, and the final one we ask at the very end to all our guests. So we've scattered Hermetic teachings throughout basically this whole conversation. But essentially in the Kybalion, there are the 7 Hermetic laws. And you've said that these 7 Hermetic laws are actually one principle and one law that gets emanated into 7 different rays. What is the one principle that connects all of them?
All of them would be connected through the law of one, but not because the law of one from the raw material taught that. They did not teach that. But there's a law of one that the raw material taught, but it's beyond them. The raw material was one of the bringers of the law of one. There will always be bringers of the law of one. So in theosophy, that's also broken up into 7 logoses, or like a spectrum from the monad. So the monad can also be looked at as the law of one. But so where that came from wasn't from any one specific school of thought, but as I was delivering that transmission, that came through. And then I quickly checked the math. I was like, and I was like, oh my God. So I gave it, and I asked questions later. So where I got it from my higher self. My higher self gave it to me, and my higher self probably got it from the Hermetic vehicle where it was originally transported from. But that, I would say, has to be referring to the fact that the law of one is then in a fractal form in all the different aspects of itself.
And I think what you just said there is one of the most courageous acts, is learning to discern the information from the higher self and not pass it through the analytical thinking where you're asking millions of questions before you even speak it into existence. Because then as it passes through the analytical mind, it's tainted from the actual source from which it came. So what you're doing there is, I'm just receiving, I'll ask questions later, and then this beautiful wisdom comes through. So that's a big inspiration for me and for, I know, whoever's listening. We've talked also about alchemy a lot in this conversation with the Alchemist. But what is one thing that you have purified within yourself that has led to the most alchemical transmutation in your life?
My powerlessness. My powerlessness, for sure, without a doubt. That's led to the most purification. It's really being with the parts of me that wanted to even come forward, looking very limp, weak physically, pathetic. And it didn't even matter if it's from this lifetime or not. It didn't even matter if that's not their true form. They wanted to present themselves to me that way. And that's what's important, because that to me represents powerlessness. So being able to hold my powerlessness is my greatest alchemical transmutation.
So beautiful. Thank you for that. And the last question we ask at the end of every show, I know this won't be the last question I ever ask you, but we call this the time capsule question. And it requires us to travel out a little bit into the future, around 10, 15, or 20 years. I chose out those timeframes because I believe that's going to be a time in history where the young generations of today will be stepping into leadership positions around the world more fully and more embodied. And just like any great leader that has ever been formed, they've had great mentors, great resources, great tools around them to be able to become the leaders that they are. So you were given the opportunity to leave behind a time capsule for these leaders that they would open in 20 years down the line. And when they open it, they'll be equipped with all the wisdom, teachings, resources, tools that you would like to leave behind for them. It doesn't have to be anything physical necessarily. It could be a simple message. It could be a poem. It could be a book. It could be whatever your mind can conceive of. But knowing that when they open this, they'll be a lot better equipped to be the best leaders that this new earth will require. So what would you include inside of the time capsule?
All right, so there's more than one thing I could put in there, right?
You can put in whatever you want. We can go for the next hour with just the time capsule.
Oh, just put in all my videos. Put in all my videos.
Link to that YouTube.
They're like, what is this? I'm like, no. Literally, when I make my YouTube videos, I haven't moved on into a more casual format, and I see myself doing it sometime, but I always go, Sarah, why do you start each episode saying during a spiritual awakening, and I do an intro? They don't perform well. It's like, why do I do that? And it's because they're a time capsule. I'm trying to make archive pieces that aren't apparently current yet, but I'll move into a more casual format at some point. But my videos are the time capsules. So can I put my videos in there?
Of course. It's not up to me. It's whatever you want to put in your time capsule.
Okay, put the videos. You got to put the Kybalion, just because people got to know. You got to put the Kybalion.
But when they open it, it has to be, they have to subscribe. Like, they can't just watch the videos. They have to subscribe.
Okay. So it's my videos, but they're not anywhere, so that nobody's worried about in case something happened to a platform or in case I change like whatever. Like, they're just my videos. Yeah.
You were going to mention something else, I think. Yeah. I cut you off there.
The Kybalion, just because people have to know the very basics of the nature and laws of this reality. The Kybalion does that perfectly. There are Hermetic scholars still fighting over how it is not an ancient resource. They can prove it. Man, get an intuition. It doesn't matter. it is ancient knowledge that was preserved and put out here in this age. And it doesn't matter how it got here. It's clearly just the vehicle. So the Kybalion, even though to me it's very simple, it is profound and it is timeless. That said, I mean, I just put a bunch of books in there. So I would say like the Hermetic Order. So that would be like Stellar Man. That's Hermetic Order mystery school teachings in Hermeticism. So the Stellar Man and the Fractal Universe. That's going to help people a lot understand about the holographic nature of this reality. It doesn't go, it's more like about proving it. So it doesn't go deep after that, but that would be foundational.
Mm. I was going to ask you books off air, but I'm glad that you mentioned them, and I'm going to order them right after this. So beautiful. And yeah, we started by blowing out the technology. And I think we just called in way too many guides, way too many high dimensional beings. But right before you started, you called in Hermes into the conversation. I just wanted to ask you, what would Hermes say about what we've talked about today, and if he'd have any final messages for humanity right now?
Yeah, I think your audience would be very interested to know that I don't call on Hermes. I respect Hermes. I channel Hermes. I don't call on Hermes. That's how much the technical issues were. And I was like, okay, Mercury, communication, technology, Hermes, and then perfectly everything for the rest of it afterwards. So people need to know that. Secondly, Hermes is who came through. So Hermes would like the audience to know that Hermes was the one who came through, who said inside my Hermetic Slav video with After School, what I'm about to tell you about these 7 laws have never been said. They've never been written. That was Hermes. When I was doing that, I was like, whoa, really? Okay. So Hermes would like to leave you guys with that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Right back at you, Hermes. And Sarah, thank you so much for showing up with such grace, courage, fearlessness, and bringing your voice into the world in such a unique way, in such a unique expression. I'm so glad I was drawn to you. I'm so glad for this connection. I have a great feeling that we're going to continue down the line for many years and develop a beautiful friendship. So thank you for all your wisdom, all your time, and I can't wait to do this again.
Likewise, brother. Thank you so much.